Well, good evening. I was asked to do this, and I thought, well, what could I talk about? And one of the things I wanted to talk about was a little piece of my own social history that hopefully will relate to many of yours. If there's any 50-somethings around, if you're younger, you've not got a chance with this. I'll have to explain it to you. But if you're 50, some people might even remember some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. So I was born in 1960, and I feel very fortunate to be born in 1960 because growing up, I grew up through what is probably the greatest musical age in British musical history. It's effectively a kind of, in my view anyway, the era of the Stones and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin will be looked at as some kind of renaissance. And the unfortunate part of that is, of course, is following it. Being a musician that has to come after that is enormously challenging. So I went to my first concert in 1971. My dad bought me a record player when I was 11 years old, and the first album I bought was Sticky Fingers by the Rolling Stones, which I wore out simply because of putting penny on the top of the stylus, and then it was 2 penny because it kept sticking in a spot. And even when I hear this particular track now, I remember where it used to stick and sort of half hope the CD will stick at that given point. And of course, by 1971, these people that made this incredible history, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, had become royalty. And royalty in my eyes and the eyes of millions of people throughout the world. And so we came into the 70s where it became almost like a sort of high baroque. And I remember I saw the Stones with my cousin when I was 11, incredibly. I think it was the King's Hall in Bellevue in Manchester. And it was an incredible experience. And I also remember seeing later on, around about when I was 12 or 13, seeing Eric Clapton. And he had a big Persian rug on the stage. And he had a sofa in the corner and 3 or 4 ladies all dressed up with flowers and things all sitting around, having a jolly good time. But the thing is, when you're about 14 or 15, as I was at that point, you find that you don't really fit into that. It's not me. It's not my world. And my world sort of arrived in 1976 when a friend of mine, an older guy actually, who was my best friend, it was his brother, and his name was Ian, and we kind of looked up to Ian because Ian always had the best music. He was extraordinary. He had like Kevin Ayers, these more like obscure things. He turned me on to Pink Floyd and the Who, and he was able to play the music really loud, and he still lived with his parents, but for some reason they allowed him to just play this music extraordinarily loud in the living room of all places, and they weren't even able to watch the TV. And I remember him sat in the church just banging away, listening to the Who like this, and he was so excited about music, and this passion I also had, and Neil and I also had, and his brother, and we were so turned on. I owe eternal thanks to him for turning us on to so much great music, And what happened was that I don't know how Ian found out, but he said there's a concert in Manchester in a couple of days, and we've got to go. You've got to see this. I've heard something about it. And so we went down to this concert, and it was in the Lesser Free Trade Hall in Manchester. And if I could paint a picture of the crowd, that would be one of the most interesting things about it, because at that time in 1976, it was still sort of a bit cool to still be a hippie. So, a lot of people still had hair, way below their shoulders, but there was also this other side, which was what I'd call the kind of Bowieites. You had people that were following every album, David Bowie seemed to have a different look, a different appearance, and there was a whole group of people that were going to the clubs. I used to go to clubs illegally. I also point out that I started going to clubs when I was 13, 14, because I hung out with older kids. And I used to work on my sideburns and shave them fastidiously so that they became more red. And I'd go in and go, "Can I have a pint of beer, please?" And think that the sideburns would get me in. And it did generally work. But anyway, back to this gig. You had these kind of like Bowieites and sort of people looked like they modelled themselves on David Bowie and Brian Ferry and the hippies. And that was it. I mean, there was no other kind of look. And until we saw the Sex Pistols. And that was who I went to see. And it was just completely shocking. The band that played also was a band called the Buzzcocks. And that was effectively, as a Mancunian, that was our Sex Pistols. Neil and I, when we formed our band, we sort of saw that, we thought that Howard Devoto and Pete Shelley were like the next Lennon and McCartney. We thought they were geniuses, and I still think their early work is fantastic. So we saw this, and it was pretty mind-blowing because we'd not seen anything like this before. And I think I was either 15 or 16, and I looked at it and thought, that's me. That's me. They're sort of spotty and not attractive, and it's all wrong, which is why it's right. And it was like a kind of an epiphany of we can do that. We can. This was a start for me. This was something that was so completely extraordinary, like a kind of something switched on in there, and all of a sudden, God bless them. I mean, I still love the music of the Stones, even stuff from the mid-'70s I think is fantastic. But it wasn't me. It wasn't my generation. It wasn't what we needed to do. And that moment really just changed everything for me and for the very small amount of people that were there. These historic gigs, you'd imagine that there was several thousand people. I think there was about 50 people there at the most. And I felt so I didn't realize it at the time, but I felt so privileged now as I look back to have just been able to experience such a moment, because I very much liken this era of punk, which in my view only lasted for 2 years anyway. By the end of the summer of 1977, what it originally represented was kind of over. It became a uniform, very similar to the era of rock and roll from 56 to 58. Many rock and roll purists say that it really ended when Elvis joined the army, and it was only really vital for the first 2 years, which is a very similar argument that I would put forward to the punk era. And the reason why I say that is because the initial concerts that I went to from 1976 through till about the end of the summer of 77, I'd see the same crowd, especially the shows in Manchester. I'd see the same crowd, but everybody was very happy to be an individual. We were buying stuff from the jumble sales and second-hand markets and sort of finding things that didn't look like anybody else, And the thing that I found most disappointing about it was how punk developed a uniform. And I think most of you would have this image of the sort of spiky hair, the safety pins, and the black leather. It just wasn't like that in the beginning at all, and I loved the individuality and how you could see each people were just looking to find their own thing, and it was just so exciting for that kind of reason. And so by 1978 it had become a uniform, and you had like the punk rockers and you had the new wave. And the new wave was kind of like a more parentally acceptable version of punk in a way, because they had a little shirts with small collars and very tight ties and tidy haircuts, but I'm still trying to figure out what they were ever rebelling against, the new wave. It was all just like it was very pretty somehow. It just didn't quite have the balls that some of the other artists had, like the Pistols and the Clash, and the Clash, incidentally, one of the few bands that actually got better through time, which was quite a rare thing during the punk era. I think because they learned to play their instruments, which was a bit of a plus. A negative at the time, but became a plus further down the line. So we decided then that we had to form a band. And so we did. It took us, weeks, months to write the songs, to even find musicians, because again, you need to understand, there was nobody out there in 1976. There were I don't think there were any journalists on the NME who thought that this was worthwhile, because they were all kind of like Bowie'ites and hippies. They didn't get it. They just were appalled by it. They say, there's no guitar solos. They can't play their instruments. This is all rubbish, And then slowly, people started to come through. I remember the writer Paul Morley was, 4 minutes? Wow, it goes by really quick, doesn't it? God, I thought I'm going to struggle to get to 11 and run out of things to say. But I remember that Paul Morley, he actually got his job because he was sending in reviews of concerts in Manchester, because there was no journalists from the NME that were prepared to even go to these gigs, So the idealism came through. So with the 4 minutes that I have, quickly now I'll race through and just try and say the problem that I faced was the issue with the anger. Because if you're writing songs from the position of being angry, you just, I'm so angry, you kind of, it becomes a little bit limited after a while. You sort of run out of things to be angry about, and I'm thinking, well, actually, I've got a pint of beer, I write a few songs on Friday night, I'm quite happy, really. Life's not that bad. I was an art student, and I got my grants. Wouldn't get it now, but anyway. And things were pretty good. But the problem that I had was that I found out that I could actually sing. So I can sing melodies and stuff. And so that's when I started to sort of just start composing music and realizing that I was pulling away from the punk thing. So by the time I'd established Simply Red, cut to the chase with the 4 minutes I have to 1985, I'd already realized that I had this ability to sort of sing in a way that many of the people during the punk era either didn't want to or perhaps even couldn't. And so many people would ask me, well, how could you have possibly made the transition from being a punk artist to this kind of soul thing that you had? Well, in essence, I think I just described that to you. That's how and why, and there was no going back, and here I am. 4 minutes? Thank you very much. I hope that was enlightening.